Hi everybody, I'm Shauna Corden, and today I'm going to be talking about using personality in your project team to your advantage. This is a great tool for all of you as project managers to use because often, especially in corporations, we don't get to choose the members that are assigned to our project teams, and often they can be less than stellar performers. And in those times, you need to make sure that you get the most out of your people and taking the time to really get to know them and make sure that you understand their goals and how they feel rewarded and acknowledged are really important. So I'm going to be talking about how to use these to your advantage as a project manager. So I'm going to skip over our welcome here in the interest of time. But just let you know that really objectives for today's meeting are how to understand your team dynamics and really to use it to your advantage. And we'll be focusing more on the HR related activities within the PMBOK. So first of all, it's really important to get to know each of the members one by one. Now remember that if you have 20 people on your project team, 100 people on your project team, you're going to have to be creative about how you get to know that, or I'm sorry, how you get to know them. And it may be that you want to create some sort of template and that you get to know them in small groups or things like that. But using your time wisely, how can you get to know them? How can you make it safe? And so one of the first things you can do is you can exchange bios with them. And I recommend all of you as project managers, be more free with your information than you'd normally be in a bio. And what I mean by that is your team members are only going to share to the extent that you do as a leader. And so introducing the prime topics that you think are important that you know about your team members will set the tone for them. So for example, you might share a little bit about your background, some of the most challenging projects that you've worked on, a goal that you have for yourself in completing the project, not just the project management triangle, but in accomplishing all of the objectives, but also perhaps having more engagement or something like that that's less tangible on the project management measurement scale. You might want to share some personal details about yourself and maybe even a hobby that you're pursuing in the background. Perhaps you're preparing to do a race or you're remodeling your kitchen or something like that, because your team members will then volunteer the same. And you might find out that you've got a team member who's got a newborn baby, which we all know that takes some special requirements for that. You might find out that they're also on 2 other projects. You might find out that this is their very first project, or they're new to the organization or new to the team, and that they might need a little bit more help. Things like that you'll only find out if you're generous in your introduction to them. One of the key questions I think that's really important is that you ask for their goals for the project. Are they learning, or do they wish to learn more about risk management? Is this the first time that they're working with this particular communication style? Are they gearing up to lead their own project? What is it that they would really like to get out of this experience? And how can you map that into the actual project plan? And I'm going to get into that a little bit later. And then how do they prefer to be recognized? So a long time back, I learned from a nonprofit leader that people usually volunteer for organizations based on 3 factors. One of them is social. So we see a lot of retired people who volunteer for a social aspect. They want to keep in contact with the community and things like that. And the best way to reward those people are to have a party. You wouldn't want to give them a plaque or something like that, because that is the opposite of why they volunteered with the organization. The second type after social would be power. And these are people who want to change the world. You may think of that as an altruistic thing, but it's actually about making change and affecting change and all of that. And those people like to be rewarded with a plaque. They're going to hang it in their cubicle or display it on their wall, or something like that. And then the third group is altruistic. They get the warm and fuzzies. The perfect example for reward for these people is maybe a handmade card by the children in the daycare center that have benefited from their volunteer work with their fingerprints all over it. And every time they look at that, it just reminds them of how good they felt in being involved in that kind of effort. On top of that, there are two other tools I want to share. One is that we need to make sure if we understand whether they're extroverted or introverted. Some people love to be recognized publicly in front of a big forum. It makes them feel good, and they're actually insulted when they're not publicly recognized. And then there's a second group of people that are more introverted. They're very happy to be behind the scenes, and they may feel great confidence in their own efforts rather than having to be recognized by others. And so they want that recognition to be more private. And in fact, they'd be quite humiliated if you recognize them publicly. And so it's really important to understand that distinction, because you may think that you're applauding them publicly, but they actually feel like it's punishment when you do that, and vice versa. And then another tool that I want to introduce, which is a whole nother lecture that you can get from me, and it's about a tool called the 5 love languages. And it basically suggests that all people have a primary language in which they hear or feel loved. And in this case, in project management, we're talking about it from a recognition perspective. And in that case, there are 5 primary languages that people speak. And probably the most prominent that we see in the workplace is words of affirmation. And that's specific recognition, not just a good job, but boy, you really handled that customer escalation calmly. Thank God you were here to save the day about this. And we're so grateful that you put in those extra hours this weekend, things like that. So words of affirmation. The second category is gifts, and these can be big gifts or small gifts. I think a lot of employees love monetary recognition, but this could be as something as small as movie tickets, candy bars, balloons, depending on, again, private or public personality type. But anything that you can show your appreciation with regular gifts is important. The third is acts of service. Perhaps it's chores or something that they would do themselves, but what can you do for them that's personal that they might have to do for themselves? This is as simple as offering to get them a cup of coffee when you get a cup of coffee for yourself. It can be to offer to update the Racy Chart for them, or help prepare their PowerPoint presentation for the next no-go meeting, whatever it might be. But tasks that they normally have to do in your personal life, this might look more like offer to pick up your partner's dry cleaning, wash their car, that kind of thing. The fourth area is physical touch. We're pretty limited in that in the workplace, but you know these people almost immediately when you meet them. They shake your hand far longer than the average person. They might touch you 3 or 4 times in a brief conversation, pat you on the back, punch you in the arm, the fist bump, you name it. So in that case, those people feel pretty isolated if they're working virtually. So trying to recognize them by doing more face-to-face activity can be helpful. And then the fifth and final area is what we call quality time. And that's just spending more time with you, and often in a one-on-one situation. So having lunches, phone meetings, things like that. Sometimes for the manager who doesn't recognize it, or the project leader who doesn't recognize it, it might feel like they're being needy. But actually, that's how they feel recognition, is to have more of your time. And you may not feel like you have the time to give, but this is the equivalent of handing over movie tickets or something like that to someone else who has the gifts language. So a resource that I can point you to that talks more about this and actually has a little survey that you can do is called the5lovelanguages.com. It's based on the book by Gary Chapman. So, And then finally, the last thing about getting to know them one-on-one after you've figured out their background and their goals and their recognition type is how can you help them achieve that? Help them in the project, help them perform, help them fulfill the duties and obligations they have for the project. And it might be that they need more clarity, or they want more approval, or they want you to grease the skids for them in some capacity. So try to give them some examples of things that you feel that you can do that are within your power. Okay, so moving on, we're going to talk about after the discovery process, how you use that material. So you've collected all this data, you have all of this information about each of your team members, then what? Well, we want to strategize. We want to look at their strengths, we want to look at their goals, so that would be more of a challenge area. We want to look at their preferences for recognition and things like that. We also want to look at their personality type, if they're more introverted or extroverted, and then figure out how to best put them to work. You've got all of the tasks, you've got the duration, you've got the scope of all the activities that are going to be happening in the project. How can you use them best to really fulfill both their desires and your needs? And one of the best things you can do is basically outline these things on your Racy chart. And if you're not familiar with the Racy chart, I'll go over that in just a minute. And then your own private version of the Racy chart that includes some of those personal items that they shared with you in the discovery process. So their goals, their hobbies, things like that, where you can actually apply them. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. So moving on here, we want to evaluate the strengths. I've had a lot of project teams where I've got some people who are quite enthusiastic about the project. They believe in the concept. They're devoted to the cause. And then I've had some project members who are clearly assigned to the project. They're not excited about it. They may not be a top performer. It could be that the manager was just trying to give them something to do. And they're kind of frustrated. Perhaps they see all the problems with the goals of the project. They see everything that can go wrong. Well, how can you use that to your advantage? One of the best things you can do with one of those naysayers is to actually put them in charge of something. Show that you value them and put them in charge of something like risk management. If they naturally see everything that can go wrong with the project and how it can go wrong, why not assign them to something like risk assessment, where they can identify all these things and how we can actually overcome them, what it would take to do that, and so on and so on. For the people who are really positive and they have a can-do attitude, they might need to be partnered with someone who's not so convinced, that they don't have the energy or the motivation, or perhaps they're distracted and they've got other assignments that are pulling them away from what they really need to be doing. So some partnership there. Positive can also be the glue or the white space for the project, connecting the dots between the different areas or different parts of the work breakdown structure, things like that. There's always a person, it seems, on each project who wants to share tools. They might say, well, Google Drive, why do we want to use that? We could actually use Basecamp or something like that. And they want to improve. They've had success, they want to share. Great, give them airtime and allow them to do that. And be sure that as the project manager, you're really clear for yourself. Does the team have a vote? Do they get to change the way we're approaching things? Or is this just for future reference in upcoming projects that they might, or projects they might be doing on their own in other areas of their life or in the workplace? So give them some airtime to do that. And then finally, for those that need one-on-one time, how can you use that to your advantage? And it might be that you need to brainstorm how to solve problems or things like that. And you can actually use that person who wants the one-on-one time to really work with you so that you're being productive, in addition to fulfilling their need for extra recognition through one-on-one time. Okay? So what's behind all the needs that people have, their goals, etc.? Sometimes it's truly a need for recognition. I like to point out to managers that if they have 10 direct reports, at the very best, they're giving 10% of their time to each of their employees. But the truth is, we're all a little bit self-absorbed, and so we think about ourselves, we think about our peers, we think about our management above us and working up the chain. And then we've got focus on the project itself. It's probably closer to 1/20th of your time that those direct reports actually get. And so some of your project members might feel neglected, and they want more attention, and they want more mentoring and things like that. So try to recognize what might be behind some of the goals and needs and strengths that they have. Secondly, it could be something about poor or positive past experiences. They've worked on previous projects where it's been done this way and they had this success and things like that. How can you leverage that and recognize that they may need a little bit more help when it comes to that? And then finally, just that personality type. I talked about the 5 love languages. I talked about their reasons for being on a project, and I talked about this introversion versus extroversion. So sometimes those introverts need more time to process. They're not able to just volunteer information off the tip of their tongue. They're not so intuitive. They want to analyze it and then come back and respond. And if that's the case, make note of that. That's a perfect conversation to include in that discovery process as you're getting to know your people one-on-one. So some more examples about putting the strengths and the personality types of your project members to work. So again, the challenger, the person who sees fault with everything, who doesn't believe in the project. How can you put them to use? Well, make them the risk assessor, risk planning, all of that. They're already doing that mentally, so why not make it official and show that you appreciate that? It's really good to recognize talent for what it is. And so they may need to partner with someone who knows the risk processes better than they do, but they're naturally thinking that way. The team builder, they may want to do some fun activities, get t-shirts for teams, plan contests, challenges, loser has to buy donuts, whatever it is. Allow them to run with that. It'll free up some of your time as the project leader, and you can focus on other activities. It also puts you in a position where you can observe the interaction between the team members and look to see where you need to make modifications. The third personality type I would describe as the sharer. They're the ones that have the tools, who read the article, who want to send the links. Give them some agenda time for that tips and tools, exchange of ideas. Could be that they want to have meetings without you just to work on some of these other activities. And if other members are interested in that, by all means endorse that, encourage it. The better the teams are communicating, the better they're going to perform. And then finally, that quality timer, the person that I described in that 5 love languages example where they need more one-on-one time, just making sure that you're working on tasks. It's not just how was your weekend and things like that, but it also includes some quality work that you can do together that'll further the project. It could be anticipating stakeholder demands or needs or late start, whatever it might be, use them for that. So we want to make roles and responsibilities crystal clear, and this is the tool that I mentioned a little earlier. It's called the Racy Chart. RACI is an acronym that stands for responsible, accountable, supporting, consulted, and informed. And you might see a few variations out on the web if you look this up. But basically what these stand for are responsible is duty and obligation to do the work. So this is someone who actually executes the task at hand as it's defined in the work breakdown structure. They're going to report on that, etc. Accountable is the neck to choke, and let's face it, all of us project managers generally were that person. If the project fails, it won't be pinned on someone that's within your team, but it'll be you. So important to escalate early if necessary, if you're not getting the resources or whatever it is that you need in order to accomplish the task at hand. Supporting, this is someone who isn't responsible for the work, but they might assist with it. A good example might be a communications person or an admin. It could be anything from printing manuals to ordering software to equipment, things like that. It just depends. They could be gathering information, all of that. Consultant, you're asking their opinion, but you're not necessarily giving these people a vote. Really important that not everybody on your project team gets an equal vote on things. And so this narrows down the decision making to just those who actually have to do it. But you're certainly, for those who are being affected, you're asking their opinion, you're considering any ramifications of the decision and things like that, how it'll affect those groups. And then finally, there's informed. They don't get a vote at all. We don't even bother asking their opinion. They're just going to be told about the decisions that were made. And of course, you're going to find out if someone actually should be in the consulted box rather than the informed box if they start raising bloody murder about a decision that was made without consulting them. Okay? The idea about this chart is really to streamline the decision-making process, make sure that people who have an interest but not necessarily accountability don't necessarily get a vote in the process. Same thing with responsible. One of the mistakes that a lot of project managers make is they dictate to the employees how a task should be done. Well, in truth, the person who's executing the task really should determine the best way to get the work done. They're the most familiar with it. They have the expertise. And so in that case, we want to make sure that the responsible person is deciding that and that we don't, as project managers, get in the way. Okay. So I've got an example here of a Racy chart. This is basically what it would look like. The far left-hand column is the project management area or the decision that needs to be made. And then the columns going to the right are outlining that responsible, accountable, supporting, consultant, informed, etc. And then basically in the box, you'll be listing the person's name. So if I go to team building and I look at responsible, I'm going to have my can-do, go-to team building expert, the rah-rah person on the team that's super positive, that loves to organize those events and is naturally motivated because of their strengths. Their name will go in this box. They may also be accountable. You can be both responsible and accountable. Sometimes, though, it is going the neck to choke, as the definition of accountable is, may be you. And so as the project manager, you might find yourself in the accountable column quite a bit. Okay. Now, what I want to encourage all of you to do is have this public kind of Racy chart contained with your project management documents. You're going to have it out there with the schedule, the Gantt chart, all of that, the work breakdown structure. But you want to have a private version of this too that actually includes your notes from the discovery process about these people that are named in each of the boxes. So if I have Tom in risk analysis as the responsible party, and I know that he's kind of got a glass half full attitude and he wasn't real excited about being on the project and things like that, I want to be really purposeful and intentional about how I recognize his work, how I encourage him. You know, those 5 love languages that I mentioned earlier. Is he a gifts person? Is he a words of affirmation person? Things like that. And I want to make a note to myself to acknowledge him in that way to keep him motivated and engaged in the project. So I like to call those things non-tangibles. So if I know that Tom, our risk manager, has a goal about managing his own project, perhaps he's a little disgruntled because he thought he'd be the overall project manager, making sure that he's achieving those goals and that I'm helping him on his path to becoming the solo or lead project manager on the next project. So things like that. And then just making a point of rewarding them. Now, again, you can delegate this to someone in your project management team. This might be someone that needs a lot of quality time, and that you're going to give them some direction of, it's time to reward Tom. He did a really good job in identifying all the risks last week. The stakeholders were really impressed. He's a words of affirmation. He's also an introvert. I want to send a private note that's going to include these particular tasks that he accomplished and did really well, and I'm going to copy his manager on that note, and I want to send it by Monday. So again, not part of the necessary project tasks and schedule, but something that you do to ensure that your team continues to be engaged and giving their best to the project. So moving on here, I want to take any questions that you have. And of course, you can contact me by email for any follow-up on this at shawnacorden@gmail.com. But if you have had challenges with this, if you want some coaching on how to work with your project team members on this, feel free to email me and I'll get back to you just as quick as I can. So some homework. Today we really talked about how to use personality challenges in your project team to your advantage. The number one thing you can do is do a brief discovery with your current team members. If you're currently in a project and you haven't done that yet, how can you fill in the blanks? You can create your own little discovery chart, and I'm happy to help you fill that out. I've got some examples that you can email me to get an example of that. Also, begin including those rewarding, in quotes, tasks to honor their strengths. And you may even want to reassign some of the responsible tasks, if appropriate, based on the goals and strengths that you discover in this discovery meeting with the individuals on your team. So I'm happy to, again, answer any questions you have. Here's my contact information. And if you'd like for me to come and deliver this presentation to your organization or your project team, please contact me. There's my info there. And I'm happy to extend this out to a larger audience. So thanks, everybody. I'll look forward to talking to you all next time. And hopefully you'll join us for our future presentation on the 5 love languages. So take care, everybody. Bye-bye.